CBC News has learned that hundreds of boxes of records, all related to residential schools, are now the focus of separate court and federal reviews. They were discovered last year in storage facilities, unexpectedly. Jorge Barrera is on the story for us from Gatineau, Quebec, and good to see you, Jorge, on your latest reporting. Tell us more about these boxes. What exactly was in them?
Okay, so we have two sets of boxes in two different cities, and both of these were found in storage lockers. Now, the first set, 124 boxes, were found in Yellowknife, and the second set, 107 boxes, were found in a storage facility in Vancouver. And just before I get into sort of breaking down what these records are, here's what Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller had to say about these finds.
They weren't being kept securely as they should be with respect to this type of information, and held with the proper entities in a careful way. And obviously, and the state in which they were found was entirely unacceptable. We're doing our absolute best to get survivors and their families a cohesive set of information as part of our moral obligation. That work isn't complete, and it's still ongoing, knowing that any sort of piece of information related to that time period can help in closure and getting an understanding of the truth.
So the 125 records that were found in Yellowknife were found by the owner of a storage facility who was cleaning out a unit that was rented out by a survivor healing society that is now defunct. The owner of the storage facility looked at these records, contacted the Information and Privacy Commissioner of the Northwest Territories, who then contacted Crown Indigenous Relations Department to say, hey, there's these records that you should look at. The department took the records, did a little initial analysis and determined, whoa, these records may be related to the residential school settlement agreement and the compensation process that was part of it. Now, there's a lot of strict rules around the handling of these sorts of records, privacy issues, court rulings around how these should be handled. So the department went to the court and said, can you deal with these records? So in January, two judges who have a supervising role over the settlement agreement ordered a class action management firm to review these records and then report back to the court as to what they are, and then they can determine what to do with them. The second set of records were 107 that were found in an Iron Mountain storage facility in Vancouver. These were left over by an agency called Indian Residential Schools Resolution Canada that was created to deal with the litigation that the federal government was facing over the decades. Now, this agency shut down in 2018, and these records were left over. Our understanding is that these records are now in Ottawa, and they fall into three basic categories. One is actual residential school historical records involving, class lists and maps for these schools. The second set of records were related to the federal government's dealing with First Nations related to residential schools, like health services analysis and community maps. And the third set of records were academic papers that are publicly available. Now, that first set of records, it appears that they are just simply hard copies of records that are already in the department's database. Heather?
I mean, we heard from Minister Miller as part of your reporting there, Jorge, and we know the federal government has promised to find any records related to the residential schools era. So what other documents might be out there?
So the big one for survivors and researchers are records held by Justice Canada that involve their legal opinions as to the liability the federal government held in relations to the running of residential schools over the years. Those have been tightly held. The Justice Canada also has all the statements of claims that were ever filed against the federal government. These would have the names of alleged perpetrators. Miller said he's dealing with Justice Mr. Lametti to figure out what should be released from that batch of records. And the other one are Indian hospital and sanatorium records, where children in residential schools were sent to these institutions, for treatment like tuberculosis. Some died there. These records are currently caught up in litigation from separate class action lawsuits. Heather?
Jorge, thank you. As always, appreciate this reporting. Jorge Barrera is in Gatineau, Quebec, and you can read more about what Jorge has learned. His full story is up on CBCNews.ca, and it's up on our front page there. This is CBC News Network.